Okay, so we are live now. So welcome everyone. Welcome to SwiftUI Group Get Together. We have an amazing panel of speakers here. I'm so looking forward to talk to everyone and get their opinion on new stuff coming out, the future of SwiftUI, and we have come a long way from 3 years now. So looking forward to talk about it with everyone. So let's start with introductions. So Eliza, you want to go first? We'll probably go alphabetically.
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Eliza. I have around 9 years of experience in iOS application development. During this period, I have deployed many applications in stores. I started my journey using Objective C, then Swift, and then finally reached to Swift UI. When it's come to Swift UI, I was so amazed to see the differences. When I look back and see, oh my god, we used to do this way in such Objective C, and now it has become so simpler that encouraged me to deep dive more into SwiftUI. I personally love using SwiftUI, the declarative style, easy composition of views, close cross-platform, we would say, make the development extremely simple and elegant. So I'm really enjoying using SwiftUI these days. So that's all about me. Over to you, Vatsal.
Yeah, hi. I'm a software developer. I'm also the maintainer of the SwiftUX framework on GitHub. I've been programming for the past decade now. I started back in the Objective-C days when jailbreaking was in full swing. So I started with developing jailbroken runtime extensions in Objective-C and C++. And then when Swift came out, jumped right onto it. When SwiftUI came out, jumped right onto that. And yeah, I've just been an absolute like love with the framework, and I hope I can answer all your questions today.
Awesome. Marcin?
Hi, my name is Martin Krzyżanowski, and I'm iOS developer. Although these days I'm mostly Mac developer, I'd say. But it's all come together with a SwiftUI, where I work on a shared code, and this is why I couldn't um, couldn't stop myself from playing with the SwiftUI because I was trying to really avoid that framework. Other than that, I'm iOS developer for a few years. macOS, previously some Microsoft Stack Enterprise, and so on and so forth. I'm really keen, and I'm always keen to learn new things, and SwiftUI is one of that. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay. Yugantar, then go next.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. My name is Yugantar and I'm a student. I'm in my final year right now, so I'll be graduating in the next 1 to 2 months. And I was fortunate enough to win the WWDC Swift Student Challenge scholarship this year and the previous year. Also, I was lucky enough that I never had to work with Objective C. I started iOS app development in my freshman year, so that was around 3 years ago. So I straight away started with Swift in UIKit. And then since the past 1.5 years, I've been working with SwiftUI. And like probably all of you, I love it. I love it a lot. And I'm really excited for our discussion today.
Awesome.
That,
That's
that's all from my
perfect.
side.
Yeah. So we have a diverse background here. Swift Student Challenge winners, people working. I know Marcin, you have worked with PSPDF kit, so text editing background, and definitely Lisa working with, and Vatsal as well, working with international clients, promoting Swift UI with open source libraries as well. So let's dive right into it. Vatsal, let's start with you. So how's your journey been with Swift UI? What made you, close to the platform, or are you actually close to the platform? What makes you love the framework?
I think when I think of SwiftUI, three words come to mind: great, opaque, and broken. Because one, SwiftUI is a pioneer in its, I guess, class. Because compared to React and Flutter, I think the DSL is far better than anything you have out there in the market right now. Apple engineers have done a bang up job in getting it to be so ergonomic. The data flow primitive is amazing. The problem is that with SwiftUI, you can't override things as you can do that in like UIKit. And because it's such a new framework, even though it's amazing and even though the standard set of components are quite extensive, it can't possibly cover everything that UIKit has already covered in the past 10 years. And parts of SwiftUI are broken naturally because it's so young and because it's still evolving. But basically, the problem is that because it's opaque and because you can't subclass things, you can't override them and you can't fix them yourself. That being said, I still do my development primarily in SwiftUI. I still work with clients in SwiftUI. The reason being, it just cuts down my productivity. It cuts down the time taken to develop an app by around 60 to 70% for me. And it's just such an elegant way of like expressing UI. I feel like it's just a natural evolution of like UI frameworks in general because Flutter and React already paved the way for declarative UI frameworks, and Apple just in a very classic Apple move, they took the parts that were wrong or that weren't great for Flutter and React. They really improved upon them with language features or like maybe design changes, and then they made this framework that just tops all the rest. So I think that's the main reason why I just love using SwiftUI.
Yeah, that's a pretty different perspective. I've heard in times. Definitely bringing on declarative syntax to SwiftUI made it more famous than any other framework. But yeah, I mean that's a great analogy between Flutter and React, the web technologies, and implying them to mobile. So, Martin, what's it's been like for you? Since you've started working with SwiftUI, how's your experience been?
Yeah, so I started work with SwiftUI because my daily job required me to do so. I didn't do SwiftUI previously. I thought that it's way too early to, well, at least back then, I thought that it's way too early to use that technology, and it's new and it's lacking some features and so on. I was not really into that. Then I got this job, which is awesome, and I have this opportunity to work on application in a Swift UI, and well, I get used to that. But definitely, the background from the UI kit, app kit, is very helpful when working with the Swift UI. Swift UI has this thing that this is a new framework, so some of the parts are really half baked, and we have to reach back to our knowledge from the previous line, like UI kit normal, to get what we want with this framework. But overall, yeah, it's speed up. Like the view creation is way faster comparing to anything else. For a long time I was advocate for view in a code.
See.
But with the UI kit or app kit, viewing the code gets really verbose. There's a lot of code to get like the text field on the view. With the Swift UI, all that noise just disappear, and you can focus on the logic, which is very beneficial for me. And over the time, like we about to launch the app that is written entirely in Swift UI, and so over time I got some confidence that well, that's not that bad. Not Swift UI is probably the future, and this WWDC really ensure me that well, the Swift UI is the future. After I
Yeah.
watched the videos and what's going on and the pushing, how Apple pushed this framework, well, I'm pretty sure that everyone should start learn SwiftUI. This is the time. Even the old guys like me who spend half our life in a UI kit on a different environment. This is the new environment, and we have to embrace that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the um, you can say a change for UI kit and app kit developers that they definitely have to embrace. Technology is ever changing. You got to move with that. I know, Lisa, you were doing some work, in Swift UI with production applications. Um,
Yes.
So how's your experience been, starting from scratch, building SwiftUI apps and taking it to production?
Mhm. If you have asked me this question a year before, I would definitely say like no, SwiftUI was very young that time, full of problems it was having. But somewhere from the very beginning, it was very magically simple. Okay, I know we need to bend very initially up to the design requirements because we were ready to take minor risk because we know SwiftUI was very premature that time. It was having declarative syntax. People were very amazed to see that, but also it was having steep learning curve. But I would say once you do it, it would be like blaze you like never before. So initially it was very challenging to do. Okay, but with this 5.5 release, I would say there are massive change in this. Okay, I remember initially I have to do create a table view list kind of structure, and my client asked me, "Can you do a search option there?" So I was like, "No, it's not available." But after seeing this kind of this release, I was so amazed. Wow, this is what we were expecting a year before. We could have this pull to refresh now. So I think these kind of changes has going to change completely a different scenario. Okay, now clients are coming to us and now they are like, no, we are pretty confident now, we can build our application with the SwiftUI. But in the beginning it was very hard to make them convinced, yes, you can do it in the SwiftUI. I personally spent, I guess, 6 months before taking a decision to make application production ready for that. I was create using SwiftUI in my side project, just a simple modules I was doing, creating a POC. I think after that time I got a like confidence. No, yes, we can make it like a production ready also. So it is quite simpler. That time there was so many limitations, but so UI kit is always there. You can use it. You can overcome those limitations that time.
Mhm. That's true. That's true. Um, so that's a good transition point to actually the new releases that we saw this year.
Hmm.
So things like refreshable, searchable, those are great add-ons to list because I feel that's one of the very commonly used components with any sort of list in iOS and the iOS and macOS world. Uh, so what do you guys think in terms of this new releases? We are closer one step. Uh, how do you think it's going to change? Because I remember I built an app in SwiftUI entirely. I put it on the App Store, but definitely to put on a search bar in, I had to integrate this UI kit search bar using some interop libraries and stuff. So, but now since we have it natively, but there's still a problem that does not have a support for previous OSs. So, I cannot run that in iOS 14, iOS 13. So I still have to support that. What do you see? How much time we we should look forward to adapt these new updates, these major new updates to things like lists and buttons that Swift has released, Swift UI released this year. Russell, I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. I think if you have even a moderately complex app written in SwiftUI and you need, I guess, advanced list operations or like list elements, you should drop down to UI table view because unless you can afford to jump to iOS 15, and even if you can do that, Apple's release cadence forces you to sort of wait every year and also force your clients to update every year to get access to the latest features. There are a bunch of libraries like SwiftUI Introspect and my own framework SwiftUI X that allow you to integrate the search bar functionality or things like that into existing SwiftUI components using runtime reflection or just providing complete ports for UIKit components. But I think list and like collection views have definitely been a major pain point for me in SwiftUI, and I found that if I want, I don't have to discard the entire SwiftUI lifecycle or do the other parts in in UIKit. I can still have my cells in SwiftUI. I can still have all my major code in SwiftUI. But the container views, like things like navigation controllers, tab view controllers, page view controllers, and even collections, I tend to think like UIKit is far more mature right now and far more full featured. So I think a hybrid approach there is recommended. But if you can use iOS 15 and if SwiftUI 3 or whatever the official name is meeting your standards, then go for it. The problem is that if you completely rely on SwiftUI's list types or collection types, you're sort of locking yourself into the feature set that's available for a year. And also, when SwiftUI was released in iOS with iOS 13, there would be behavioral and runtime changes every minor version, and even sometimes during patch versions, and it would cause unexpected runtime behavior for lists and navigation and things like that. So I'd still, even though the stability is great right now and it's drastically improved since SwiftUI 1, I am still wary of behavioral breakage that happen across minor versions, and that's why I prefer to keep the control using my own UI collection report, but keeping my cells in SwiftUI because SwiftUI's core animation primitives are just fantastic and rock solid. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really, yeah, that's again a great opinion on. So there's, I believe there's like a general sense of agreement in the community that you probably still have some time to, you know, completely rely on SwiftUI. You still gotta
Yeah.
know UI kit for, for few complex scenarios that might not be covered in SwiftUI.
Not even
Uh,
complex scenarios. It took them 2 years to add a modifier to remove the separator on a list, which is just insane. I mean, how do you not build something that simple? I'm sure they have reasons. I mean, the people behind SwiftUI are insanely talented, and I'm sure there are a lot of API decisions that they want to get right the first time. I think that's also the reason why a lot of these API
yeah,
changes are delayed or like they're taking a while to manifest. Because think about it, they're really pioneering how you can declaratively interact with things like scroll views or collection views. Scroll view reader, for example, was such a
yeah,
novel way of solving imperative access to the scroll view while still maintaining the declarative nature of SwiftUI, right? So I'm sure these APIs don't form by themselves in a vacuum, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of testing and validation to really get them right. But yeah, because it's so new and because it's still limited, far limited compared to UI kit, I'd say that for complex components, you should drop down to UI kit. But because SwiftUI, like when Swift was released, has excellent drop, and Apple has made that like a huge point of emphasis. Also, like if you file a DTS for a missing feature, they'll get back to you saying that you can always drop with UI kit. And I think that's perfectly valid and it's a perfectly reasonable solution. You can keep your main app in SwiftUI. You can keep using SwiftUI's data flow primitives, but you can just customize the elements that you want in UI kit. And
yeah. I think we lost you there at the end because
oh, sorry, I think my touch bar is missing out.
okay.
Yeah, I was saying that you can keep the you can get the benefits of SwiftUI, you can keep the benefits of SwiftUI, but you can still build your core critical components in UI kit.
Got it. Got it. So, Martin, coming, bringing that perspective to you,
Yeah.
you have
So
seen, yeah, please.
yeah, I agree with Wessel on everything. But the SwiftUI thing is that Apple tried to force us to use the standard components in a standard way, and this is the tools that we get and we can use. If you want to do anything that is not standard, like to expand the search, let's say, well, you cannot use the searchable anymore because you have to reach to NS search field or UI search field and customize that one, and you cannot customize that easily on a SwiftUI site. Uh, so you have to reach to AppKit or UIKit subclass and do the old school, and this is very common with the Swift UI. I don't know if it is saying already, but I had it multiple times. In Swift UI, simple things are simple, and complex things are very complex. So if you really want to change the background and Swift UI does not allow you to do that, you spend a week doing the simple modification, which normally would take you 5 minutes. And this is something I don't appreciate in this approach, because we get used to that we can do so many innovative things with UI kit, like pull to refresh. It was from the community. The idea came from the community, and Could we do that now with the SwiftUI? Probably. Well, not easy. We will probably lack something here and there, some gesture because it's not available, and so it's easier. It's harder to provide the custom experience to the user. But maybe this is the point of Apple design, or maybe this is the concept of SwiftUI, to give a tool that allows us to build application based on the items that are familiar for everyone. Um, I kind of feel that way, that Apple tried to push developers to build to use back to roots and use the native components. But we can do that all the time. Like the searchable, we just got the searchable. This is a very good example. We get the searchable, and it's really, this is a searchable and auto completion, right? This is the two things where we've got this a few days ago. And if you want to do anything else, like, I don't know, move, do something with the field itself, like with the content, you can
Yeah.
do. Let's say you want to implement it in a way of a mail app, when you have a tags, and you have some action in there in the search field. Well, you can't do that with SwiftUI now. And then really this is a rabbit hole to implement that by yourself. Well, you have to do it on in AppKit and UIKit, and then just wrap it in a SwiftUI. It will work. Will we get some customizations for to most of the components with UI? I don't know. We've got something for buttons and, I don't know, the labels. A few of them got the styling, right? Uh, if we get that more, that may be easier to build a custom UI. Otherwise, we really have to we have to accept the status quo that we get from Apple.
Yeah.
Just either use that or spend a lot of time to re-implement some of the components. So knowing the UI kit currently today is crucial for SwiftUI developers.
Yeah, I think there's also a underlying concern for so even if we want to do these customizations, so for example, refreshable, refresh the list, you see a spinner going in. Let's say you don't want a spinner at all, you want some animation with a text. Even if tomorrow we start getting those abilities in SwiftUI, I feel there's still concern in terms of technical design, that how would we pan that out, keeping in mind the default functionality versus versus adding a custom UI. I know we're probably going to use views and contents passing on in our declarative syntax, which is nice, which is not really bad. But um, I've also heard from a lot of folks that they have a little bit of concern that SwiftUI actually bridges in the views and the business logic, which is not good, which we probably want to keep them separate.
Yeah, another spectrum from that is how do we fix bugs? With a UI kit, how do we fix bugs? Well, we do some async, dispatch main async or something like that with some class. And, because the bugs are here. And searchable, again, searchable. There's a long standing bug with this pull to refresh, when the spinning wheel will stop spinning once the application goes to background, right? And you go back to foreground, it's that spinning does not animate anymore, but it's still visible. How do you? I didn't check that. I guess this is a still case with SwiftUI because it uses the same component. Maybe not. So how do we work around that? Well, probably we won't use this modifier. We will use custom modifier, because there's not easy way to work around UI view controller that manage the state of this component, and I don't know, it's getting hard to to fix
Yeah.
some foundation bugs.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to do that with the private API any longer. Like with the UI kit, we know how to deal with the private. Sometimes we can use some private API, and it's even used that on App Store if we are careful. But with the Swift UI, it's so hard. Like everything is so complex
I think it's just getting there.
yeah.
Actually, that's
I have a
that takes me to you, Gunther. You're coming in from a very young background. You started, as you said, iOS 3 years ago, and you only have seen the most of the Swift world yet, and SwiftUI came as a hero maybe to you. Uh, so, what do you feel? When you started off, if you got a chance to look at the Objective C version of apps, or UI Kit complex version of apps, do you feel SwiftUI made more of a contribution, or had some role towards you getting towards iOS easier, or how was your experience there?
Understood. Yeah. Uh, I would say absolutely. SwiftUI has a huge contribution. So when SwiftUI was launched in 2019, Apple had a tutorial project called Landmarks app, right? So I went through that, and I wasn't able to understand that, to be honest. It was just so different than UIKit. I already had 2 years of experience with UIKit. I had already done internships and already built some big projects with UIKit. So it was a huge paradigm shift, and that discussion was at a lot of places online also, that the way we build apps in SwiftUI, the mentality, the design, everything is just so different. It takes a little a little time to get used to that different mentality of building a declarative UI instead of an imperative UI. And
Yeah.
so I did not understand that, and I was like, nah, I don't like it. And then 5 months later, I tried it again, and then I loved it. And since then, I have never made a new Xcode project with UIKit.
I
And
see.
so there was also this question that how mature is SwiftUI? I think that UIKit has a 10-year lead against SwiftUI, so that will take some time. And I don't think that for the next couple of years we can ever have a moderate to large size project which can rely solely on SwiftUI. So with UIKit, we can rely solely on UIKit. With SwiftUI, I do not see that happening even in the next 2 to 3 years. I think that if you have a fairly large size project, you will definitely need to go to UIKit sometimes or the other. But I do not see that as a problem, because SwiftUI
Hmm.
gives you that ability that go to UIKit, go to
Yeah.
AppKit, make a UI view representable. What I do see as a problem is when those things do not work. So, for example, search was discussed a lot, right? So now we do have a framework called SwiftUI Introspect. Now we also have the modify searchable. But before that, to implement a search bar and to get the native UIKit behavior, that was nearly impossible. So last year I was doing Google Summer of Code, and there we were building an open source project called Mentorship iOS. So there I had to make a search bar, and my mentors were very strong about the opinion that it should be totally native. It should act just like UIKit. So if you scroll, it hides, and if you scroll again, it shows, and the cancel button goes to the right. And I searched the whole internet, and I wasn't able to find a good solution for that. And the only workaround was that build your own search bar. And as in, I was happy with that, but my mentors weren't. So what I had to do was I had to make a whole port for that. So I used the whole navigation controller of UIKit and attached a search bar to it, and I made a whole UI view controller representable for that. It was a complex workaround, and then it basically replaces that. And that is my only Stack Overflow answer. In fact, I never had to post a Stack Overflow answer with UIKit. With SwiftUI, we do have to do that. And even then, there was this limitation that so the solution that I made, that it only worked on the root view of a navigation view,
Hmm.
right? So,
Hmm.
so I think there was no perfect workaround for that, and that was the main problem for me. Going back to UIKit, if I can get something done, that was not a huge issue for me. But something that is nearly impossible, something that does not have a perfect workaround, that was the main issue for me. And yeah, I mean, so I think it will take some time. But seeing SwiftUI
Yeah.
3, I can say that uh, I think it's pretty mature by this point because there's not a single major component that I think is now missing in SwiftUI. So I think last year we can say, yeah, this is missing, that is missing, search is missing, search is so essential. And I think now after SwiftUI 3, there is not any highly critical or highly essential component that is missing. So I think it's much more mature now, but hybrid uh, approach with UIKit and SwiftUI, both of them in the same project, I think that will be the most common design.
Yeah, I think everyone's pretty, very excited regarding searchable and refreshable because it solves a lot of problems for a lot of developers around the world. So that's the main, I just feel that's like the biggest release for SwiftUI. Like when I hear opinions there. So there are a lot of good things that came out. Just let's touch that. Martian, you come from a text editing background, so there's Markdown support natively in
Yeah,
SwiftUI.
there's
What do
Markdown.
you feel about that?
Awesome. Like really, that solves so many problems. Really, like previously was just impossible without going through NS attributed string, which was from the another world. And now you can just use the markdown, get it localized. So it's wonder world, I would say. Really, the change is huge, and I really love it. It saves us some work because we had in plans to do by ourselves. Probably everyone uses the markdown, so I think this is a great decision to stick with that. Do not invent, the Apple
Yeah,
styling something that would be nightmare. And yeah, the attributed string is it's not a layer, it's API. It's really welcome. Uh, the best thing of that is that um, we get this API, but we can use that on any platform, and we just it increase the surface of the views that we can um, build for macOS and iOS at the same time. Yeah, the attributed string is the novelty. You could do that probably. You could do that previously, but yeah, this is novelty. We get localization stuff and first class support. We get some other functions, but what I wanted to mention was the Jugentor said about the multi-platform of the Swift and shared code base. And this dub shown me, I see the message that the macOS is no longer a second class citizen of SwiftUI because it was for 2 years already.
yeah,
Uh, I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time on SwiftUI on macOS, and there were problems that do not exist on iOS side because like iOS was this this popular, macOS was not really. But now we got some even just macOS API like table view, which is huge for macOS improvement and the API. Really, I watched the table. There are two sessions dedicated for SwiftUI and macOS, which is right. Really, Mac is so old technology. We barely get anything updated on applet these days. But we have two sessions on SwiftUI and Mac, and that really recommend to watch those. There's this table view view. I think it's table view. Um, we 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 had to build NS table view for that to use that previously, and we can just after that change, we can just remove our code and replace most of it with this component, which is awesome. And I really believe that the SwiftUI is the future of the multi-platform. It's not Catalyst. I said that multiple times on Twitter, probably, if anyone heard that. I believe that Catalyst is just a transition technology maybe maybe um, it will last for some time, but the Swift UI is the future. Um, we already can build views that works in the same way on macOS and on iOS, which is great, and this is the future. I see that on this. After
Yeah.
I watched the the videos, the depth up, like this even this searchable. Really, it works the very same way. You can use that in a shared code base. You couldn't do that previously, so I believe this is a huge performance boost for us.
Nice. I guess our audience is very keen to know more and more about it. But sir, they really want to know about like Swift UI experience with the Mac OS. Can you share your experience?
Yeah, I think SwiftUI has grown leaps and bounds since the initial release on macOS. A bunch of people on Twitter that I follow, they build these macOS apps. Thomas, he built this app called Reddit OS, and basically it was used as the standard for like benchmarking macOS SwiftUI apps, and it performs quite good on like the latest release. I've been using macOS Monterey for a while I'm saying for a while, since the past few days, and it's been great. I think I completely agree with Marcin about the fact that SwiftUI is going to be the main cross-platform technology. I'd given a talk on semantic SwiftUI at TriSwift last year, and it was about how Apple is now forcing developers to think in terms of semantics, and how that's a very, very good thing. And I see more and more evidence for it with the new modifiers they release. Like think about the new modifiers like control prominence or like control size. They're no longer forcing you to think in terms of like the pixels or the actual width. They're just asking you to think in terms of like how is this big? Is it small? Is it regular? Or is it very prominent? Prominent? Is it not prominent? And they'll handle the magic for you. When it comes to customization, I share the same concerns that all of you share in terms of like that yes, that they are offering new features, they are offering new capabilities, but you still can't override them. You still can't override what a large button looks like, or like what a small button looks like. And I'm very optimistic that they'll launch ways to override those things. Like they launched toggle style I think last year, which allowed you to tint a toggle. And I'm sure that they're thinking of how to allow styling for other components or like other behaviors using protocol-oriented methods that allow you to like share it across the code base and essentially theme your software app or skin your software app. But then that's what it's really boiling down to. You think in terms of semantics, you think about data flow in terms of semantics, you think about your UI in terms of semantics, and then everything else is just a skin or a theme. And that's what Apple really wants to go for. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's going to take a couple of years, but I think they're really listening to the developers. If there's one thing we've seen in this conference, in this WWDC, is that they have really listened to developers. They made a lot of quality of life improvements, and yeah, macOS has like grown leaps and bounds. Table is something I definitely want to see on iOS as well, but the fact that we got it on macOS before iOS is definitely something. So yeah.
It's like a win-win.
Yeah.
I still didn't check if the NS outline view from macOS is worth to switch to outline view group, because the last year I checked, it was not really there. I mean the NS outline view, which is this hierarchical view. The macOS component AppKit component was still superior to the SwiftUI solution regarding the drag and drop, and so. But the drag and drop got some pretty major update today, and maybe the outline view on macOS is better as well. I didn't check that yet, but yeah, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the intention behind SwiftUI, to promote a cross-platform API and cross-platform framework, so that you don't have to, jump hoops to learn something on AppKit versus, UI kit. They also removed the action controller I don't remember the name, but similar to action controllers, it's exactly same on in both iOS and macOS. So that's pretty great actually, because being an iOS developer, sometimes it felt left out that you cannot build apps for Mac, maybe, or there's a learning curve. Uh, but it's being eliminated, so that's great.
Mm. I'm still looking forward. Probably next year we get to update on the SwiftUI API regarding the access to keyboard, like not just a keyboard shortcuts, but
Yeah.
all events of the keyboard, which are important on macOS, are less important on iOS. But again, we have iPadOS with a keyboard, and people just use that, and we missing that. This is one of the things that stops me from building a few things in a Swift UI. There was no update this year. We got Focus, which is awesome. I don't know if the Focus, this Focus, I don't know how it's the state
The first
Focus,
responder, yeah.
Focus
Focus state, yeah.
Yeah,
finding
focusable.
Focus. Yeah,
Yeah.
super important thing on macOS. A bit less important on iOS. This is probably why we got it this year, not the previous year. There was something for the tvOS, but who cares about tvOS? I don't know. 5 people on Netflix and 3 on Hulu. And yeah, we got today, and it solves so many problems with the first responder. That was a huge problem for us, at least on macOS, where the focus is. So we're getting there. We're getting there. So there will be a change. The shift in approach. We will probably no longer talk about first responder at some point. We just will call it focus, because they change API completely, the approach completely, and I like it. The old API has some problems, and we get the new API, new approach that
Yeah.
should solve that. So I love it.
Also, we have seen some huge accessibility improvements this year in WWDC.
Yeah.
Not only in SwiftUI, but I see it across almost every product. So, for example, even the Xcode compiler that we have accessibility improvements in that, and the foundation, the language itself, and what I would really love to know what are your thoughts about the new accessibility features.
Yeah, I think because the declarative nature of SwiftUI, since the programmer is now expressing more of their intent about the app in their code, it allows Apple to optimize for accessibility really well. Like for example, components like label, they allow Apple to either hide or show the label as needed based on what platform you're showing it on, or based on what the dynamic type size might be, etc. So you get a lot of these behaviors for free in SwiftUI, which are completely implementable in UIKit, but they're very tedious to implement because you have to do it one by one. And I think it's fantastic because they added a lot of new capabilities to SF symbols also. And the thing with Apple is that when they design a granular component, they probably have teams working on like the accessibility side. They have teams working on like micromanage, basically like, just perfecting it, like getting it absolutely ready for all edge cases in all scenarios. So you get to tap into that and you get to leverage all of that, like Apple, the classic Apple attention to detail and perfectionism, without having to spend all that time yourself, and which is ideally how it should be. And SwiftUI is definitely paving the way there. So I think the main problem with some of the components again is styling, and the moment you switch to something that's custom UI kit, or you switch to a custom SwiftUI view to mimic an Apple control, then you lose those accessibility features. But Apple also has modifiers to easily add accessibility annotations to even those custom controls. And I think they've added a bunch of new modifiers as well, and they've added a way to localize accessibility for SF symbols and their descriptions on screen. So I think it's just fantastic what they're doing there.
Yeah, and I really agree on that point that when they update something, they do it holistically, right? So one of
Yeah.
the reasons why I was so passionate about the search API this year, out of everything else, is because I do not see the search update as just an update that helps us to have a UI search bar and to be able to present that. I also see the search update that we have this year that actually makes the entire process of searching easier. So to take an example, they have made some updates to core data this year for SwiftUI, right? So when we use a core data with SwiftUI, we use a fetch request, and in core data to filter something, we can have a predicate and we can give sort filters. And with the API that we had last year, or even with the API that we have right now for Xcode 12, dynamically updating those sort filters or dynamically updating those predicates was a very, very difficult thing to do. And now, so this year they've updated that API, and now it is very easy to dynamically update a predicate. And I think that that fits really well with the searchable modifier, because so suppose you're searching for something, you can simply pass that search keyword to the core data predicate, and it dynamically updates the view in real time. So yeah, I mean, once they update something holistically, and that is really incredible.
Yeah, that's an astute observation. I think, yeah, they're not just trying to port UIKit behavior one-to-one to the declarative paradigm. As Marcin noted, like, they're now calling the response machine focusable. And it's not just a rename, but they're actually changing the way you think about it. Because in UIKit, everything has access to everything. And in SwiftUI, it's all about, like, restricting access, keeping it contextual, keeping it very scoped. And it's not possible to just translate some concepts from UIKit directly to SwiftUI without having to completely change, like, the paradigm, the naming, the scheme, how you think about it also. And I think all these changes are for the better. I just hope, I mean, that we get more modifiers next year, and that a lot of people update to iOS 15. I think that's the biggest blocker to a lot of people updating and to SwiftUI 3 and, like, using the new modifiers.
That actually takes me again to the questions from our audience, which, there's something I feel strongly about. So we have like two related questions that I'm going to ask you guys here. So one is that SwiftUI and design patterns and app architecture. So this is like still a big question for everyone. So a person here says like they're interested in learning about writing clean code and maintainable reusable code. So what design patterns do you recommend using with SwiftUI? If there's any recommendations and any on learning platforms as well, which they can use. Also, how do you envision SwiftUI concurrency given the architecture in mind?
It's a bit of wild west, isn't it, these days with the SwiftUI architecture? I mean, the Apple just shown us SwiftUI and said, yeah, there's a view, and well, it's not MVC, and we will not call it. You figure out. I kind of feel that. And then we've got a third-party solution like GCA, the composable architecture, which is one approach. Some people are trying the Redux approach from web, right? And all of that probably works to some extent, but what I see the most is just bananas. You just mix anything with everything. You have this view, which is not a view, but is more like a controller, and the controller gets data, gets the logic. That's how the modifiers are built. That's how the samples are built. We don't really get a solid theory behind the architecture that we should use, like we've got with the UI kit, where we got, okay, this is MVC and all the framework is built around MVC. Those are the priorities, and you should follow that if you want to be a good citizen. With SwiftUI, I don't see that. I don't know how you feel about it. Everyone just trying something. Like we tried Redux, but we don't really use Redux. It didn't work for us, so we use some just portion of that. Uh, I don't know. When I'm working on my own product, I don't think about architecture in SwiftUI because I don't think there's any. You just follow the lead, just create a view, create the bindings, and yeah, there's now async API, and we watched we watch the video and the sample code is, yeah, here's the view and here's a network request, right? For multiple years, we were listening to this one lesson. The view should not trigger
Yeah.
a network
Right, right.
right? But now this view, but it's not the view. It's just a protocol view. It's just a description of the view. It's not the same layer, but it's all together. So I don't know. I really don't know what is. The TCI seems good, but it doesn't. If it won't get any blessing from Apple, it may get problematic at some point if implemented too hard. I don't know.
I think that I think that's one thing that actually contradicts, as you were saying, it contradicts with previous. Since lifetime we have been hearing the same thing. The views and network requests shouldn't be mixed. But I just someone in the audience also pointed out uh, async image. It's a it's a view, and you're expected to pass a URL. So it's doing the thing behind the scenes, fetching the image and doing everything. How do you feel about that? Is it sort of promoted by Apple that you kind of mix your views and the business logic? I personally tried using MVVM, with no result. Again, it seems like most of my business logic is still in my view, which feels pretty bad. So I think there's just still a lot of confusion about how to build a clear architecture around SwiftUI.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I.
I can
Oh,
comment on
sorry, go
that.
on.
So, this was actually a big discussion point last year when I was doing GSOC. So, because it was an open source project, so we wanted to have a good app architecture so that it can be maintainable and contributors from around the world can just easily come in and contribute to the project, and that it can be testable. And so the architecture that we decided on was MVVM, right? But Apple, of course, does not explicitly states that use MVVM with SwiftUI. So that got me curious because Apple did state it MVC for UIKit. And I was just thinking that
Yeah.
why is it that they don't state a architecture? They must have stated architecture. And I was researching a lot on it. And I actually talked to a lot of Apple engineers about that last year, this year, both. And the main response that I've received is that in UIKit, implementing some different kind of an architecture was a difficult thing to do. So suppose in UIKit you want to implement MVVM, that was a very difficult thing to do. It required a lot of boilerplate, a lot of extra coding, a lot of extra
Yeah.
things that you had to do. And MVC was a natural thing that just went with UIKit. With SwiftUI, personally, I feel that MVVM is the natural thing because with observable objects and all of those, I think they automatically act like a view model for your view. And in SwiftUI, also suppose you want to implement a different kind of an architecture, right? So like you said that just go with the flow, just do anything you want. We have tried Redux and we've tried MVC and everything. So it kind of shows that SwiftUI is very, very flexible in that way that you can easily implement different kind of architectures in that. And that is exactly what an Apple engineer also told me. So I think if I'll have to give a suggestion, then I would say that MVVM feels the most natural architecture for SwiftUI. If you have a special requirement, it should not be very difficult to do that.
I want to say I don't think Apple has figured it out themselves. Because think about it, they've been introducing new data flow primitives every year. State object came last year, right? And before state object, you could write models in a certain way. But with the introduction of state object, it also changed the paradigm and what you can do and what reusable models or views that we can build. And I feel like Apple has a huge opportunity to use the SwiftUI environment concept to do dependency injection. I've personally done it for much of my views. Like, for example, I have a cache that I want to propagate down to all my views. So the views can take the responsibility of fetching the images or doing network requests, but they can still use the cache that is passed top down, from the main container of the app. So that's like I feel like that's a missed opportunity for async image because there's no way to override those things and there's no way to customize that behavior. But I hope Apple is building something to that effect. I'd agree that MVVM right now seems to be the way to go because it's the most familiar superficially and also conceptually with a lot of concepts that SwiftUI brings. in terms of practical recommendations, I would say steer away from navigation view and use the coordinator pattern or something else to your navigation and UI kit. I feel like that's something people really get confounded by how do you use navigation links to trigger navigation flows imperatively? What happens when you're dealing with deep linking? What happens when you need to dynamically present something somewhere? And I just tell everyone now that just use UI hosting controllers, keep your main navigation flow in UI navigation controller and UI kit. Still use SwiftUI for everything else, but definitely don't ditch UI kit just and some of the imperative paradigms just yet. So building on on how SwiftUI allows you to mix and match a lot with different architectures and paradigms. I think right now, because Apple themselves, I don't think have figured out what is the ideal architecture for SwiftUI, because the primitives for the ideal architecture might not even exist or they're being built. Maybe they have it figured out. Maybe it'll just take a while to build it out. I think the thing you can do right now is use imperative APIs like for navigation and for things like the tab view controller wherever it makes the most sense and it's the path of least resistance for you. And SwiftUI dealing with navigation links is just a headache. And use MVVM because it just makes sense with SwiftUI views. But don't discard the possibilities of the paradigm shifting the next year or in the years to come. I don't think there's any single prescription any of us can give right now. Like, even if you ask the most advanced software engineer, or even if you ask Apple, even their answers were sort of generic and a bit non-committal, because I think it's unfair to expect them to have. I mean, there to be a proper unified model of doing architecture in SwiftUI just yet. It's just 3 years in. UIKit, even though it's got a decade behind it, it's got even more behind it because it was derived from AppKit, which was there even before, right? And it takes decades to build good patterns. It takes decades to build good architectures. And what SwiftUI is accomplishing right now in a span of 3 years, at least in the public eye, is just insane. So I think it's it's likely to change. Is my point.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. We have another question from the audience. So it's regarding considering the legacy code bases. So Apple still uses Objective C, in a lot of their tech they built, but they're slowly transitioning to Swift. And we also saw the new weather app is completely Swift UI. So the question is specifically that would there be a point in time when we wouldn't see Objective C on Apple's platform? And same goes, if you talk about UI kit, since Apple itself transitioned to Swift UI for weather app, do we see a point in time where Apple's native apps, like the in-home, in-house built apps, those apps are not using UI kit anymore? And if the same thing to be followed by other large code bases, how can they start that transitioning period today so that they can reach a successful Swift UI app in some point of time later on?
I think one thing I really wanted from Apple, which I haven't seen Apple do, is offer more UIKit primitives and more UIKit views that interop with SwiftUI. Like, they have UI hosting controller, but there's no UI hosting table view cell. There's no UI hosting collection view. So if you have an app right now that's primarily based in UIKit, which I guess you can start calling legacy now, given that SwiftUI is maturing at this point. If you want to incrementally adopt SwiftUI, it's very difficult because there's not a lot of documentation on how to make SwiftUI view sizing work with Apple's UIKit sizing. And I think because projects can't just be rewritten overnight, and especially for a company like Apple that is vending software to billions of devices, and they have the software is scrutinized and it has to hold up to the standards to billions of devices and billions of people. I think a lot of the code bases will still remain in Objective-C for a while, but not because they can't rewrite it. It's just because the cost of rewriting it might be too high right now in terms of time, effort, or that it just doesn't make sense because SwiftUI could mature to a point later in a couple of years where it makes the transition quite easy. So I don't think there's any one clear answer to this question. It's a case-by-case basis answer, but some apps like Apple Wallet, etc. I think they were built in Objective-C from the start, even though Swift was there and Swift was usable at that point. I'm not sure why that was the case. Maybe it was for security. Maybe it's because the team that was building it was extremely comfortable with Objective C, and they have a plan to transition later. But again, I think as companies scale and as you think about these products that have been in market for a long time, the question is not as much of a technical question as it is about a business or a resource decision to be made. Because yeah, right now with SwiftUI and UIKit and Drop, you can build a fantastic iOS app. And there's nothing stopping anyone from converting an existing legacy code base to a SwiftUI and UIKit hybrid app. But it's just a matter of time, and it's just a matter of like whether you want to do it right now or a few years down the line. So yeah.
Yeah, we will get more and more SwiftUI and more Swift and less Objective C. But there's one thing I want to recall here, which is if anyone look at the AppKit these days, it still uses a Carbon framework, which is
Right.
deprecated. I don't know. I don't think it's
The
even
dinosaur.
deprecated. It's not used,
Yeah.
right? But some menu components still use Carbon. And Carbon was this technology that was transitional, and Apple also said, okay, now we use Carbon because this is the next big thing. And eventually they introduced AppKit that made the Carbon deprecated and forgotten in a history, and we just have AppKit. So the same may happen with this transition. So we have a UI kit that for now it does not cover everything. It's built on the shoulders of AppKit and UIKit and so on. But at some point we will get components built entirely in a SwiftUI, entirely in Swift, without the baggage of Objective C, and this is the time when the transition will complete. But will we ever drop the Objective C? Well, I don't think so. Remember that we still use the core foundation and the other core frameworks that are written in C or Objective C at best. And we just have a layers built on top of that. So we may stick with all that environment for a very long time because the effort of rewriting everything is huge. It's really huge. Maybe not pay off. So yeah, it's good to know Objective C still for a few years, at least reading that. Not necessarily writing, but the reading is good. Even if we probably use a Swift most of the time these days. Still, the headers, documentation, and a lot of Stack Overflow will refer to Objective C, and we will see that in a stack trace.
One other fun fact: the UI color picker, the color well component in UIKit, it's actually backed by a SwiftUI view. So Apple is already internally they're stressing and they're pushing SwiftUI to its limits, and they're trying to like really validate it. Pure SwiftUI components, and I think we're going to see more and more of that. Like having control center and notifications in on the Mac being built in pure SwiftUI is already a huge sign of validation internally from Apple's side, I'd say. And now with just the Shortcuts app, the Weather app, and I'm guessing other parts of Apple also, like the Apple Pay bottom sheet and things like that. I think we're going to see a lot of Apple UI turn into SwiftUI components because I think they just need to do it for sanity internally. Because think about the number of platforms they have now. I feel like SwiftUI was born not just out of necessity for developers and like just as a natural progression or like evolution in UI frameworks, but also because the complexity of building official iOS apps like inside Apple, that must be exploding. Like I'm sure there's a reason why they pushed messages to be Catalyst with macOS Big Sur. Because it must save them so much of time having one team as opposed to multiple teams for the same app. And again, I want to refer back to Marcin's point about like SwiftUI seems to be the poster boy for a standard, common, and unified framework. And again, Apple has gone out of its way to emphasize that it's not going to dictate the same UI on all platforms. It's not going to do that, and that's what we're seeing with all these semantics in SwiftUI. You're not thinking in terms of pixels, you're not thinking in terms of colors, you're thinking in terms of semantics. we don't say black or white anymore. I mean, you do, but like if you're building for labels, you think in terms of primary or secondary or tertiary, right? So it's all about thinking in terms of adaptive and semantic UI, and then having it map automatically to whatever is the native idiom of like each platform. And I'm sure that code bases will be rewritten just for the sake of reducing complexity, because yeah, it's the bar to build a great iOS app or like a great macOS app right now has never been higher. There's so much of complexity. There's so many new features that you have to incorporate. It's just not possible to do it individually for both iOS and macOS without having some sort of shared code, or without having some sort of helper there. And I think SwiftUI is going to be that unifying framework.
Yeah.
I
And
agree.
there's also another fun fact that this almost exactly the same question was asked on the SwiftUI launch, and the question was directly asked to Josh Schaffer, and so he basically gave the answer that the reason why they used SwiftUI in the new weather app was because they had to rewrite it in any case, right?
Right.
It was going to be a totally new app in any case, so they thought, why not SwiftUI, and why would we do that in UIKit? And I can actually see that pattern everywhere. So if we talk about the control center on macOS, it's a completely new thing, so they did SwiftUI. If we talk about the other things, like the shortcuts on the Mac, again, totally new things, so they use SwiftUI. And he also gave the answer that 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 is how they're going to approach that. If it's a totally new thing, then they will probably prefer SwiftUI. If it's an old thing, then they will transition slowly. And as far as Objective C is concerned, I think I totally agree with Marcin. It's not going to go anywhere, because
Yeah.
I think Objective C is not about, like, the direct competition is not SwiftUI as much as it is Swift. And Swift was launched many years ago, and Objective C is still there. And again, as Vatsal said, it's because the projects are too large to be rewritten just for the sake of changing the programming language. And there are so many Apple engineers who are very, very comfortable with Objective C. And so and it is kind of a common wisdom that it's more important to think about the problem than the technology that you're going to use for it. So was in a talk where Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey was talking to us, and he basically said that same thing, that how I do is that I think about the problem, and then I think about which tech can help me to solve it, rather than the other way around. So I personally think it's not important for Apple to just think that, oh, there's Objective C, let's replace it. As in, they're not obligated to do that in any way, or I do
For the
not think
sake
how
of refactoring.
advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this takes me to the point. Many people usually reach out to us and they ask they want to start their journey from where they should begin. They should directly jump to the Swift UI, or should they go back to the UI kit? They should learn that first. Martin, what will you recommend in that case?
This is the worst time to start doing the front end on iOS. I would say start with a UI kit still if you're looking for a job, because this is what we do, and this is what the company will expect from you, because the application is probably already done and you're hired for maintenance or something. Startups, on the other hand, or new projects may ask for Swift UI, but it's like an optional. It's definitely optional these days. Um, well, eventually we have to learn both, but still, knowing the UI kit is fundamental knowledge.
Yeah.
The UI kit is more than just the buttons. There are a lot of frameworks on iOS itself that are not covered by the Swift UI in any way. So we have to be familiar with that anyway. We got, I don't know if SwiftUI got maps, but that kind of components that are not covered by the SwiftUI, and we need to use that. The video, the audio processing,
Scene
all
kit.
of that is in a
Yeah.
UI kit, and yeah, learn UIKit, and use some spare time to catch up with SwiftUI. Really, SwiftUI is not that hard that you need a year or something to PhD in SwiftUI to get. But really, it's like a 2 weeks and you're up to speed, right? Really.
Yes.
Uh, uh, but you have to still have to know UIKit. So I would say learn UIKit. It's way harder than SwiftUI, and will catch up with SwiftUI really, really fast.
I completely agree with you. Okay, it's been such an interactive, amazing session. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Okay, now we can jump together.
Yeah. So yeah, just before we go, just want to thank Marcin, Vatsal, Aliza, Yugantar so much for coming in uh, and sharing your experience. It's been a great talk. We definitely want to see you in Gather. We'll just jump over and we'll talk to people around us. Let's see, let's hear their opinion as well. And it's been a great session. Thanks so much once again.
Thank
We'll
you
see
very
you in
much.
Gather now.
Yeah.
Take
Thank
care.
you,
Thanks for hosting
everyone.
it.
See you.
Thank you.
It was
Bye.
awesome.